Qatar says it's reestablishing diplomatic ties with Iran, but it's still unclear whether the diplomatic rift that put them at odds in the first place is over. Middle East correspondent Michael Pluchak explains.
Qatar remains defiant towards its Gulf neighbors. On Wednesday, Qatar announced it would return its ambassador to Tehran more than 20 months after he was recalled in January 2016. At the time, Qatar was following suit after Saudi Arabia. Riyadh had cut ties with Iran, accusing it of failing to protect its diplomatic mission in Tehran, which was overrun by protesters. The angry mob took to the streets after the Saudi kingdom executed a Shia cleric who, according to authorities, had terrorist links. The decision by Qatar to send back its ambassador is saturated with political meaning. 11 weeks ago, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt took simultaneous and momentous boycotting measures against Qatar, accusing it of having too cozy ties with arch foe Iran and promoting regional terrorism and instability, charges Doha denies. Since the boycott began early June, Iran has been instrumental in relieving Qatar's transport and trade siege by allowing Qatari planes to use its airspace and by sending fresh food supplies to Doha. Far from scaling down its ties with Tehran at the demand of Saudi Arabia, almost 3 months into the Gulf Rift, Qatar seems defiant as ever towards its boycotting neighbors. Michael Pluchak, I-24 News.
For more, let's bring in Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president and founder of American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Qatar is an ally of the United States. How is the United States going to react now that they're reestablishing diplomatic ties with Iran?
Well, it's very interesting. I guess that answer to that question depends on which part of the State Department. Is it the Arabist, sort of Islamist sympathizing part of old, or the new sort of Trump administration leadership? My sense is, first of all, we have to understand what's happening in the Middle East. You have a realignment. There are two divisions in the Arab Sunni world, if you will. The Qatari Turkish Muslim Brotherhood division, which is a populist Islamist sympathizing wing that was funding and fueling the ISIS Muslim Brotherhood rebellion against Assad. The other side of the Sunni equation is the Salafist, monarchical dictatorship type side of that equation. There's always been that separation, but yet they were aligned both against the Shia in the 20th century. Now you find the Qatari part of that equation increasingly isolated because the Trump administration called out the Qataris and said, listen, you guys need to stop funding the Brotherhood. Al Jazeera and other media are fueling global radicalization, and they called them out on the Brotherhood sympathies and on Iran. Qatar is too far in with Iran to break that relationship because of the natural gas that they share. That is a huge amount of the economy. They're not going to abandon that. So this latest move is basically Qatar saying, listen, we're going to reestablish full diplomatic relations and dig our heels in on that 20th century schism. America's response, we have to wait to see what that's going to be. I think America so far has been more on the side of the Saudis on this equation, but they want to maintain stability.
But Qatar doesn't really like Iran, right? Their approach is more, let's engage with them and sort of contain them rather than push them away.
Well, that's a fascinating question. I think in the long term, they don't like them. I think if push comes to shove, if Qatar was able to have seen the Muslim Brotherhood maintain power in Egypt, to see a Islamist regime in Syria, etc., they would then push them away in the long term. In the short term, Qatar is the one that has close relationship with the Taliban. They seem to have these convenient relationship with viral Islamist groups, no matter how militant they are, because they ultimately have the same end goal, which is Caliphism, which is Islamism on the ground, a populist Islamist movement, and they're anti-Salafi. So the Al Thani family in Qatar has been in bed with Qaradawi and the Muslim Brotherhood movement, and the Brotherhood has been in bed with the Shia Islamists for long. Ultimately, the cataclysmic long-term equation does at the end have the Sunni-Shia schism causing a problem, but in the short term they have a lot of common interests.
Right, and their connection with the Muslim Brotherhood was one of the reasons the Saudis put this blockade on them. But what's going on with the blockade? Did it sort of just fizzle out?
It did, because at the end of the day, you've got a large American base in Qatar. You've got an equation in which right now the common enemy is ISIS, and Qatar is saying they're going to stop any type of Perry funding of the Al-Qaeda groups, Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, etc. So they see that happening, so they ratcheted back. Hajj is coming. I was actually saddened to see Saudi Arabia initially politicize the migration of pilgrims to the Hajj. That should never be part of the political dynamic, no matter how much conflict exists. So I think that was an opening in which Qatar said, oh, it looks like you guys are softening. We're going to get our diplomatic ambassador back to Tehran in order to show that we really are going to make it back the way it was in the 20th century.
Right. As you said, Hajj is coming up. Are you concerned about what might happen with having Muslims from Qatar, from Iran coming to Saudi Arabia with all this tensions going on? Will everybody be safe?
Well, as you showed in the initial clip, you never know what's going to happen in Tehran. In order to respond to the Saudi assassination of the Shia cleric, they attacked the Qataris. So ultimately, I think history has shown the vast majority of pilgrims come for spiritual reasons. They set aside their national Islamist grievances, but you never know. Ultimately, it's up to the Saudis to maintain peace and order during the 2 million plus that come for the pilgrimage, and I hope and pray that no innocents suffer from that.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
In the Netherlands, Dutch police say they stopped a terrorist attack on a rock concert. Only a few details have been released about this conspiracy, but police have arrested a 22-year-old man near Rotterdam. Police say terrorists were targeting a concert venue where the U.S. band Al-Alas was going to perform, and police called off the concert after receiving information from Spain that an attack may happen. A tip led them to the suspect, and police say that terrorist threat is now over. We now know the names of those missing sailors from the USS John McCain. The U.S. Navy identifying all 10, including one whose body was found by divers. 22-year-old electronics technician, 3rd class Kenneth Aaron Smith, was from New Jersey. His remains were found during a search of the ship, which collided with an oil tanker off the coast of Singapore on Sunday. The Navy has now suspended the search and rescue mission in the surrounding waters. Divers are now focusing on finding the rest of those missing sailors. Still ahead, bracing for Harvey, the massive hurricane sends a southern state in the United States into emergency mode. People are lining up for food, supplies, and gas. The latest on the storm, next on Clearcut.